Welcome. I'm Steve Dickey with Mississippi State University, and I'm here to talk to you about making a timber salvage and regeneration or managing a damaged forest decision following some kind of a storm or casualty event. It's one of the worst decisions you'll ever make as a forest landowner. There's no good decision, so I'm just here to guide you on making the least worst decision you can make. When we think about timber salvage, it's a very disappointing thing because what used to be very valuable timber is now very low value product. So you can go from saw timber, maybe even utility poles, to pulpwood. So you get pennies on the dollar. Very difficult to harvest, so nobody's really interested in getting it, and it's quickly deteriorating. It's a terrible situation to be in, and if you're in it, I'm sorry. We're here to help you a little bit and guide you on what kind of decisions you can make. The timber salvage sale is just like any other timber sale. There's certain things that have to be done. Number one, you got to contact buyers and loggers in your area and be persistent about them. Again, you've got a product that's not of value, not much value to anybody, and it's not going to be easily logged. So you got to be persistent. I've heard of people calling the night of Hurricane Katrina to line up logger or a buyer, and they were the ones that actually got their salvage done fairly quickly. Make sure that you have proof of ownership or authority to sign a contract. You own the timber. If it's still in your mom or dad's name, you may not have that authority. Make sure the corners and property lines are marked. They might have been marked before the tornado, but they're not there now. So you may have to remark those. Contact your county supervisor or whoever's in charge of the roads in your county, and make sure you have a route that can go from your property to the state aid road, the state or federal road. 80,000-pound trucks and 15 foot of clearance is usually the minimum. And then the photograph here reminds me that you need to have about 20 acres for sale, otherwise you're going to have a problem selling it. There's a yellow arrow, that's a acreage that was above 20 acres. That was easily salvaged. The one below that was only 3.2 acres. That one there was extremely hard to market. In fact, I think the owner had to leave that timber there to rot. Could not market that small of a tract of timber. Salvage priority. What we're talking about here is how fast the clock is turning. Clock turns faster on certain types of salvageable material. In particular, pine is going to deteriorate and rot a lot faster than hardwood. Just the nature of the beast. So that you have to be a lot quicker on that. If you have some saw timber that you might be able to salvage, saw timber degrades into pulpwood extremely quickly. So again, you have a very short window to be able to salvage that timber, and anything with major damage, you have a shorter window than something that's just moderately damaged. The reason that we have such a short window for salvage is because there's a lot of insects and diseases that not only attack the tree to kill it and to degrade the wood, but introducing all these rotting fungi all at the same time. So within a few months, the tree has deteriorated in terms of quality, and then the decay fungi take out the wood over time. So you have about a couple months to get quality wood out, and then after that you got pulpwood maybe a year and a half to get out. Now let's look at the evaluation of individual trees. So before you can make a decision whether you need to go ahead and just do a clear cut or you have a manageable stand, you have to look at the individual trees, and then from that look at the stand as a whole. So we start with the trees to begin with. We're going to look at salvage priority. If the trees are snapped off, it's salvage. Uprooted, it's salvage. Leaning, maybe 50-50. When the clock is turning differently on the types of damage that we have, especially in pine. Uprooting, that's horrible for pine trees. They only have a very short lifespan. We've seen uprooting, especially after Hurricane Katrina, last for several years. So some of these hardwoods can lay on their side for several years and not die. So uprooting in hardwoods is not near as bad as in pine trees. When we look at leaning, How far is the tree leaning? Now, if we think of 12 o'clock on the face of a clock, 12 o'clock is vertical. Anytime you get to 1 o'clock or 11 o'clock, that is 33 degrees off of vertical, trees start having a problem, but we still think that's a minor damage. That tree should be able to stand for the next 10 to 15 years. Once you get past 33 degrees or 1 o'clock, you start getting into questionable whether that tree could stand and defy gravity essentially for the next 10 years. And once it gets to 2 o'clock, that is 66 degrees off of vertical. That tree is not likely to last more than a couple of years. So we would throw that tree into salvage. We don't expect that tree to be there very long. Pine damage, wind, and we'll look at hail next. They're damaging the top of the pine trees, and pine trees don't like that at all. They much rather lose lower branches than the upper ones. And they can take about 25% of the branch loss without any significant damage. Once you get above that, it becomes significant, starts reducing health. You start getting ips and other engraver beetles attacking. Once you lose 50% of your crown or more, we would probably go ahead and throw that in the salvage. You need to salvage that pretty quickly. We don't think that tree's going to last that long. Hail damage, example here, it just beats the snot out of the tops of the trees. Pine trees just don't like that. They don't recover from this very well. Same way, you get close to 50% loss of your foliage. You might as well just throw that tree in salvage. It's not going to last. It's not going to be able to withstand that kind of damage. The opposite is fire. Fire burns the foliage from below. So these crown scorches can get into 80% before we really start getting too concerned about pine trees. And with longleaf pine, and we see 100% longleaf like in this slide, man, the homeowner was happy. These trees respond quite well to 100% crown scorch. I don't know what's going on with that species, but it can take a lot more than any other one that we got. Hardwoods are tougher than pine. I think I've already said that once. Let me reiterate. Hardwoods are a lot tougher than pine trees. And so you can keep trees that are with a similar damage if it's a hardwood compared to a pine. Until you get 50% branch loss, hardwoods are going to be able to recover. They have epicormic sprouting and all kinds of other things that compensate for the loss of foliage that pines don't have. So they'll be able to take a lot more branch loss. The same kind of leans, though. Physics still rules the world. And so you get a lean above 33% or 1 o'clock, 11 o'clock, you're likely to lose your hardwoods just like you will your pine. Until you get to 75% branch loss, we would not consider a hardwood likely to fail in the next 10 years. Now, how do we make a salvage decision? We take what we just learned, looking at individual stems, how bad they're damaged, whether we think they can live the next 10 years or not, as a group. And then as a group, you make a decision, well, majority of them are this way, and majority of them are that way, and make a decision. So that's how you're going to do it. You're going to have to actually do a cruise of some kind to figure out how many of your trees only have moderate damage, a slight damage, or major damage problems. And if you say, I got major damage problems on most of my trees, how many tons per acre do you have out there that's been damaged? So when you do these cruises, you can come up with how many tons per acre is available for sale. And it's very difficult to come up with these numbers. And the number one problem with these kind of sales is not only being able to figure out where your stems are and stuff, but how much does that stem weigh? Initially, when those trees were standing before the damage occurred, trees can weigh 50 to 60 pounds per cubic foot. After a month or two, it may be down to a 40 pounds per cubic foot. You know, you're talking about 30–40% reduction in weight. And 20 pounds per cubic foot is real common in timber that's been sitting there all summer. So you're talking about extremely light wood compared to what it was originally with all that water in it. So it takes a lot of wood to make 25 tons over time. But let's say, yes, you can salvage because you've got 25 tons to the acre out there and you got at least 20 acres. guess what? There's no such thing as thinning after a casualty loss like this. You're going to have to either clear cut and regenerate, or you're going to have to leave it there to rot. Like I said, there's no good answer here. Because so you're going to have to cut good trees off this 20 acres, or you're going to have to leave your damaged trees to rot. That's your two choices. One thing that can help guide us to make a better decision than just how many tons per acre you have for sale, let's look at the trees you have standing left. Are they manageable? Do you have enough trees there to manage? Otherwise, you know, you'd hate to clear cut a stand that you might be able to squeak by and manage. So that's the second question. Do you have a manageable stand left out there after the storm has left us? Typically with pine trees, we look at the density of the stems, called basal area. Cross-sectional area of the stems at 4.5 feet off the ground. It's a function of the size of the stems and how many trees to the acre you have. And we'll typically use a prism when the trees are standing. But there's other methods of figuring out basal area. Typically, in the far right-hand column, that's the manageable, 50 square foot of basal area per acre, or if we convert that to trees per acre, that would be 47 trees to the acre that are 14 inches in diameter on average. That's the circle, the green circled area. Under the 50, the far right-hand column says manage. That's plenty of trees to manage right there. So if we have that many trees still standing out there that we consider only minor damage or no damage or even moderate damage, we might say we'll go ahead and manage that property and not salvage. So that's a decision you got to make. You're going to salvage it or you're going to clear cut it. Meaning a salvage is a clear cut, or you manage and you leave the stuff to rot. Again, there is no good decision here. We're trying to minimize our losses here by making a least worst decision. And then in this example, the far left-hand corner, most experts agree that 30 square foot of basal area pine is just too low to manage. So if that's all you're left with out there, 28 trees to the acre, 14 inches in diameter, that's the red circle area, then we probably would just say, just throw all the trees in and salvage the whole property and just give up on it. So and then in between, that's your call. So I've given you the two sides, 47 trees to the acre, 14 inches in diameter, manage. 28, I'd say go ahead and just clear cut the whole piece of property. Anything between there is your call. Now what complicates things is trees that look fine are internally damaged. Believe it or not, a tree stem is essentially just a bunch of water columns with water stuck to each other being pulled up to the leaves. Whenever those columns are broke, they are never repaired. All they can do is they can put out new ones. So if there's enough water columns broke out there, even though it looks like the tree is okay, if those water columns are broke, those trees are going to die over the next year, and Ips beetles are going to hammer them. And usually 5 to 20% of pine trees next to a tornado or some other severely wind damaged area are going to die the next year because of Ips and graver beetles. And I believe it's because there's some kind of internal damage you can't see looking at it. Looks fine, but the water columns are all screwed up and those trees are going to die. Hardwoods are not managed by basal area. We typically use John Putnam's B-line for management. And so there's an example of that. That'd be on the far left-hand side that says manageable. The B-line, BA is basal area and TPA is trees per acre, just like we showed on the pines. Here are 14-inch diameter trees. We needed 78 trees to the acre to be sure that we have a manageable stand according to Putnam's B-line. If you get below that, the C-10 area, it takes 10 years to grow into Putnam's B-line, or the C-20 area that takes 20 years to grow the remaining trees to the B line before they become manageable. Those show you like how many years it's going to take you to wait before the trees are manageable. Typically, I circled here, if you only have 35 14-inch diameter trees an acre, that's the C20 area. It's going to take you 20 years of growing those trees to be able to get to a point where you are considered manageable stand. I'd say go ahead and clear cut at that point in time. So in between those, that's your call. But those are your parameters. 7 to 8 is good, 35 is bad. Anywhere in between there, that's your call. Now there's some problems managing, let's say, okay, I've got a 50. I've got 50 trees there, so I'm kind of in between. I'm at the C10 line, the 10-year line. That model assumes 4 inches of diameter growth every 10 years to grow those 14-inch diameter trees to an 18-inch diameter tree to where it'd be fully stocked again. Now, guess what? Trees that have all their branches snapped off, which we just talked about, these trees have suffered some damage. They're not going to grow like they were before the damage. It may take more than 10 years. So don't be surprised that these trees just quit growing. They actually do not grow from 14 to 18 inches like the models show. And many hardwoods will put out epicormic sprouting. So just because the trees are 14s and you're going to grow them to 18 inches in diameter, doesn't mean they're going to be any good, because epicormic sprouting might destroy it. It might turn it, what you could have maybe salvaged for saw timber is now pulpwood. I've given you some guidelines, basic guidelines, rules of thumb on making decisions on whether you're going to do a final harvest and regenerate or manage a damaged stand. Neither, again, is a good, easy answer. There's no good, easy answer to these questions. My advice is to get someone local. You can go to your county extension office to find out who the foresters are. Local foresters are in your area. The Mississippi Forestry Commission is a great resource. Or if you have a local forester that you use. And if they give you any suggestions or guidelines that are different than what I've just given you, go with what they say. They probably know more than I do, especially about your situation and what's going on the ground and the markets in your area. So hopefully we're of some help to you. Good luck on your recovery. God bless.